Okay, so next up is Maya Zankoul. Maya Zankoul is a successful designer, and she's actually the founder of Maya Zankoul Design, her own design agency, which is very cool. And Maya is going to talk about the super user. Sorry, I forgot the title. Okay, she's going to talk about the super user.
Hello everyone. I'm Maya Zankoul. I'm a graphic designer, and I love to design for web, mobile, tablet, all types of user interface design. So today we're going to be talking a bit about the super user. When we talk about user experience or user interaction, we always say the word user. So who is this user? So we're going to take a little trip to designer's dreamland, which is a place far away where the super user lives. So who is this super user? It's a superhero of user interaction and user experience. He or she knows how to use all the platforms perfectly well. They use the same fonts as we do. They use the same interfaces as we do. So let's take a closer look at how their brain functions and how they work and what makes them so special. If we look inside how their brain functions, we will get this weird animal thing composed of different adjectives. So let's start with the memory. So this super user has the memory of an elephant. They will remember every single button, every single small message that you add on an interface. So they're really the perfect users for you. They have the visual acuity of an eagle. So if you use very small fonts that are not practical to read, they will still see them and they will still read them perfectly well. They have the navigation skills of a bat, so they will go through as many pages as you add. It's no problem at all. Don't spend time on the design. They will know how to use the application. They also have the stamina of a camel, so they're very patient, and if it takes 3 hours to load, if it's very difficult to use, no problem. They will wait on it and they will persevere until they know how to use it. And last but not least, they have the dexterity of a monkey. So if you add very complicated features, they will figure it out and they will know how to navigate. Unfortunately, we don't live in the designer's dreamland. We live in designer's hell with a lot of platforms and with disasters on the level of user experience. So what we need to think when we're designing is that we're designing for everyone, all types of people, and not just people who are tech savvy, like the designers, the developers, people working on the application. So to go back here, what we need to think is the total opposite of what we just said. So we need to make something that is very memorable, that when you see it once, you will never forget it. You will always keep it in your mind. So it will be stamped in your mind just by looking at it once. Same thing for the visual acuity. You need to make everything clear, simplified, bold statements using probably big typography, using bold visuals. Navigation skills needs to be very simple to navigate because users do not have the navigation skills of a bat. They are very impatient, so it needs to be a really straightforward and very easy to use. And last but not least, it needs to be very intuitive and easy to understand. The way I like to solve all those types of problems, is to going back to basics and using illustration, real-like interfaces that look handcrafted, that do not look like they belong to a screen, but rather to the real world. So using textures from real life, using hand-drawn design, hand-drawn text, those things, I believe, make a design very, very intuitive and very friendly. Why is that, you ask? Because, as Henry Bergson says, we have a type of memory that is called habit memory. So there are things we see around us since we are small that we are very used to. And if translated to a screen, we will definitely know how to use them, because this is something we've been doing out of habit since we were very small. So to explain this more visually, let's go through a series of images. To go back to nostalgia, everyone says now with the screen, we don't have the book, the feeling of the paper is lost. Well, I say no, actually it's not lost, it's just a bit different, but we can still achieve this beauty of tangible things, of handmade things on applications. This is an example. This is a designer called Mike Cuss who designed I Love. And if we look at a chirp web design, what it reminds me of is those cutout letters that we used to cut out of magazines and make small designs with. This is perfectly translated on a website. This gives it a very friendly feel, close to the heart, and when you see it, it makes you curious. You want to know what this is about. Another example by the same designer is how to use print effect on the screen, which is something a bit witty, because this effect is called overprinting, and it's achieved by printing many inks on top of each other. There are no inks at all when you're working on a screen, but yet he used the same effect to make something new and unexpected when you're designing for a screen, be it mobile or web or tablet. Also, the more we're getting advanced, the more we're going back to basics. Everyone knows that to call a phone you need to turn, and maybe some people love it and miss it. So this application is a perfect example of how we can use UI to go back in time and to go back to basics and to gestures which are intuitive to all of us. Another example is the page flipping. Last year I published my comic book, which was based on my blog, and everyone said, why are you publishing your book? It's on a blog. And people would say it's better on paper, you can feel it. But then when you're reading a book on your iPad and you're flipping the pages and you're seeing this visual in front of you, it brings back the nostalgia. It almost has the same effect as if you're still using it in real life. So this is an example of very intuitive design and gestures that are added in the user experience. This is another example, the click. Unless you're claustrophobic, you've certainly clicked on an elevator button at least once in your life. So clicking is something very basic and that anyone can do, and which translates perfectly well when you're using platforms. So when you see a button, you want to click on it. And this is how we appeal to users in their most basic instincts, if you want. Same thing for the selector, of course, which reminds us of the stamp, which we see everywhere, and which makes it understandable. When you see it first, you might think that it's complicated, but it's actually, it's been there all the time. It's not new. It's simply inspired by real-life things. So whenever working on a new design, new interface, new idea for an experience, I always like to go back to the very basics, to everything that is real and tangible, and that uses the hand, because at the end of the day, it's still the same. Another example is the cassette. When we see a cassette on Facebook with those pictures going all the time, you would say, oh, nostalgia, etc. You can still achieve the same thing via a simple application. Same thing for people making music or creating music. It hasn't changed much, and with those beautiful interfaces and the option that we have with designing very detailed buttons, very detailed words and illustration, it makes the experience of using tablets and mobiles, etc., almost real. Same thing for the guitar. Playing an instrument on an iPhone is practically almost the same effect as using it for real. Same thing, another example is the game that you play with on the iPhone, and as George was saying, you're using your phone as an accessory. So this is something very, very essential, that it has multiple uses. So to end this, I like to do this analogy all the time between using the pen and making a movement, and making the movement with your finger while using your phone. So this is why I like to compare illustration and designing for interfaces. I think they're very close, and visual art and UI UX design are very, very closely linked. Thank you, and if you have any questions, please feel free.
Anyone have any questions?